Okay, good evening, everyone. I now call to order the regular monthly meeting of the Burlington Electric Commission held on the second Wednesday of the month at 5 p.m. here on 585 Pine Street. Today is February 11th and the time is 5 o'clock. Let the record show we have a quorum present. Moving on to approval of agenda. Commissioners, you've received the agenda for today's meeting. I have one proposed amendment. Are there any other proposed amendments to the agenda? Okay. The one proposed amendment is that for item number 7 for the financials, that's actually for December 2025, not January. I have a motion to approve the revised agenda.
Move to approve revised agenda, or move agenda as amended.
Thanks. Second. Great. Thank you. We have all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? 4 ayes, passes. Thank you very much. Okay. Next, the approval of the minutes. The minutes from our previous meeting were that was held in January have been distributed. Are there any corrections to the minutes? Corrections? Okay, hearing none, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make the motion to approve the minutes from the January meeting.
Great, a second? Any discussion on the motion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion passes 4 saying aye. Okay. Oh, wait, apologies. I should abstain because I was not present. Pardon me. 3 ayes, 1 abstention. Thank you. Okay. Next, we will hold the public comment. I will now open the floor for any public comment. Each speaker is asked to state their name if they've signed in. Do you have to sign in?
I don't.
Do you need- Okay.
You don't want to speak at all? Nope, we don't have anyone from the public.
Okay, great. Anyone online who wants to speak during the public comment period?
I don't think we have
Nope.
members.
Okay. We are always welcome. We encourage public engagement. Thank you for considering that. Okay, next, moving on. We have the monthly impact minute.
So James is going to do a brief introduction for Nate, who's with us here in the room and is going to present on this. So James, over to you.
Thank you. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Nate Gunnish, also known as Nathan Gunnish, but he prefers Nate. We have been very lucky to have Nate serving as a DOE fellow since September of 2024. Did I get that right?
That's
no,
right.
5.
Yeah,
No, 4?
24, yeah, that's right.
All right. He is on his second year. It was a 1-year internship. It's now been renewed for a second year. And he is going to talk to you a bit about some of the stuff he does at BED. And apparently BED was not so abusive that he didn't choose to come back. So Nate, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Yeah, thanks, James. Thanks, everybody. I know I've met a few of you here before, presented here at the commission meeting. But yeah, Darren just asked me to give a little bit of a high-level overview of the fellowship that I'm a part of and the work that I've been doing here at BED, as James said. So I'm an Energy Innovator Fellow. This is a Department of Energy funded grant, 2-year grant. It came with an initial 1-year assignment with an opportunity to extend for a second year. That's what James was referring to. I was glad to stay on for a second year when James gave me that opportunity. So just to give a very quick overview of the grant or the fellowship itself, it's funded by the Department of Energy, administered through the Oak Ridge Institute. There's about 40 other fellows around the country. There's 2 others, I think 2 others in Vermont. There might be 3. One at Stowe Electric. He lives down in Virginia, but he does work for Stowe. And another at Washington Electric Co-op, who's new to the program, really nice guy. So I've had a chance to work with him a little bit. And the fellows are all over from Puerto Rico to Alaska, California, all over the place. It's sort of an interesting arrangement being a fellowship. I'll just say that, I don't technically work for Burlington Electric Department. I work on behalf, or I serve at Burlington Electric Department. So that's kind of the official language that we're asked to use as it relates to the fellowship program. Though the one other thing I did want to say about the fellowship is Department of Energy does a great job emphasizing learning and training. If you know anybody who is sort of seems around my age and is interested in the energy space, it's a good way to get involved and there are cool opportunities all over the country. They do a lot of training. We have a big stipend for attending conferences. So I always go to, the Renewable Energy Vermont conference. I went to a great conference in Texas last year. And they offer monthly sessions on the grid and energy markets and so on and so forth. So the fellowship has just been a great learning opportunity. I was at Efficiency Vermont before this, so I had some energy efficiency experience, but this was a great way to learn more about energy production and so on. So that is the first half of what I wanted to say, which is just a little high-level overview of the fellowship. What I actually do at Burlington Electric Department is I implement the Building Giants program. As I mentioned earlier, I've been down here to talk about the Building Giants program a couple times before. Giants stands for Grid Edge Integrated and Aggregated Network of Thermal Storage. It's a pretty long acronym, so we go with Giants. But essentially the Building Giants program is an evolution of our Defeat the Peak program. I'll go through this in pretty high level detail, but if you guys have any questions, just let me know. So we've done voluntary Defeat the Peak demand response initiatives for, James can correct me, but I think 12 years. And the Building Giants program is an effort to move that into automated flexible load management. So we want to integrate with commercial building HVAC systems, commercial process loads where available, as well as residential electrified heating and cooling systems to start doing automated flexible load management throughout the Burlington territory. It's a great opportunity. A lot of our biggest costs are driven by capacity and transmission, so our monthly peaks and our annual peak, and this is a way to reduce those costs, which is good for resilience and good for cost effectiveness for Burlingtonians. Downstream, we hope that it makes electrification of heating systems, i.e. heat pumps and other electric HVAC for commercial spaces, more cost effective, right? Kind of closes the spark gap between electric heating and natural gas. So that's the idea behind sort of Building Giants. Oh, I'll mention that it's self-funded by a separate Department of Energy grant. So separate from the grant that funds my salary, separate grant by DOE. I think I'll just say that so since I was last here talking about the Building Giants grant, we faced some delays. The Department of Energy, with the change in administration, we faced some pretty acute uncertainty around grant funding in the spring. Got through that. And then went through a pretty significant review process, but we've been approved by the Department of Energy to continue basically sending expense reports to them for the costs that we're incurring in the program as of December. So that's really exciting. We got a lot of our final contractual details for the commercial program in place this month, and we've started enrolling customers. So big thanks to the Energy Services team because they've done a lot of that outreach for us here at BED. But we're hoping to start enrolling C&I customers, start site visits in March. Maybe I can come back in a couple months and show you guys some photos from some cool site visits that we do. Hopefully we'll get those C&I customers going in no time. Some slight delays still on the residential side of the program, but we do think that once all of our contractual stuff is in place for the residential program, actual technical implementation will be a lot easier because we're not talking about building energy management systems for large commercial buildings. We're just talking about heat pumps in people's homes. So happy to provide any more detail about that type of thing if you guys want. But I think that gives a little bit of the high level of what I was hoping to discuss with you guys. That's what we do here.
Is this similar to, remember there was an old system that BED had years ago?
Yeah.
Where I don't know if you had to have a device in your house or something.
It's the
where-
Energy Miser.
That's exactly,
Yeah.
yeah. So are we talking something like that where
Similar.
where as a customer?
Similar,
Yeah.
similar, but not the same.
Okay.
So Power Miser was a strict radio control signal, but generally running on predictable schedules. This is going to be much more dynamic. But the concept of a monthly credit for a load reduction value is where they definitely have an intersection.
That's right.
In fact, the radio antenna tower, I think behind the room you're in was maybe even put in originally to control the power miser devices.
We've advanced since then.
And the technology in the field has advanced since then to heat pumps, right? Whereas that was all controlling electric resistance technology as well. And this also has the commercial and industrial part of the program. We're working with a third-party contractor to do that controls contracting because it's fairly complicated. But yeah, we have a partner that we're working with for commercial buildings.
That's where I feel like at scale, you're gonna get your best bang for your buck. Are there any, or do you have any large scale people that you're working with that you can disclose or let us know, like, hey, or is that a kind of a?
Yeah, I don't necessarily want to say exactly who we have. Nobody signed the contract to start,
Right.
participating in the program quite yet. But yeah, a lot of the biggest commercial businesses and entities in Burlington we've communicated with about the program. We are working with the city, so a lot of city buildings, school district. So I can mention those. So any large commercial building that has smart enough controls to integrate with and electrified heating, or it could just be cooling, but especially places where there have been water source heat pumps or ground source heat pumps put in, those are really good opportunities for us to, we don't really mess with the comfort of the occupants when we do these flexible load management events. It's just about shifting the set points a couple of degrees for the buildings that participate in the program, such that we move energy that's used from a time that's really expensive on the grid to a time where there's a bit more solar penetration. Sure. It's a little cheaper to operate.
And there's a financial incentive for them, correct? In the sense that they get, is it similar to like the EV charging rate concept or something?
It's structured so that for residential customers, it will initially be a flat per month credit of $5. For commercial and industrial customers, obviously that won't work. Their credit would be scaled on the amount of controllable load they provide. And then based on the results, we will potentially change those structures to be more like an end use rate as time goes on. But what we've done is if you recall, we ran a pilot program with 10 willing victims, including among others, Darren and myself. And we're using that data to structure or to calculate the initial credit here. But a 10 customer pilot is not a large subset, and it's not necessarily reflective of all customers. So we set the credit pretty conservatively to make sure that ideally it should not go down, it should go up if it goes anywhere. So, but also our ideal state would be a volumetric credit, so that the more you use, the more of a credit you get, making it more comparable to natural gas to run a heat pump.
Moving in the direction of the EV rate, but starting with a flat bill credit for kind of ease of implementation for now, while we collect data.
And based on that limited data set, yes. Thank you, Nate.
So part of success would be at some point you're rolling this out for both commercial and residential customers to sign up for.
Yeah, that's right. And here in Vermont, we can do, as a municipal utility, we can do pilot rates. So right now for the commercial and industrial program, we actually have a pilot tariff that's live. When we're ready to launch the residential program, we'll also launch a pilot tariff there as well. But at the end of those pilot tariffs, those are 18-month limited rates. We hopefully will have collected enough data and start to have enough, outreach in the community to then convert from a pilot rate to a full-fledged rate similar to the EV rate that we have.
Cool.
Great. Awesome. Thank you, Nate.
Yeah, you
Appreciate
bet.
it.
Yeah, thanks, man.
You can bring me down anytime you have any other questions about it.
Great. All right.
Thank you all, and thank you, Nate.
Yes, thank you, James. Appreciate it. We have, next is the Commissioner's Corner, and I might just take a moment at the Commissioner's Corner because we have someone who'd asked to speak, and I think they were just maybe had missed public comment by just a moment. So I'm going to invite, it's Jacob Flanagan up to speak because they were hoping to be part of the public forum. And if you could state your name and your organization for us, I'll appreciate it.
I am Jacob Flanagan, and I am speaking on behalf of the Burlington Window Dresser Group.
Burlington what?
Window
Sorry.
dressers. It's okay. Things are working, guys. This is great. So yeah, I came last month because I know we wanted to talk to you guys, in particular Jody, which is Scott's neighbor there, was like, we should talk to BED about this and see if we can collaborate more. But we weren't really ready to make a presentation. And then Jody said, let's do next month, and we got on the schedule, and then she went on a road trip. So I'm here today to talk to you guys and tell you a little bit about what we're doing and why we think a closer relationship with BED would be a great thing for both of us. So what are we doing? What we're doing is window inserts. So these are insulated window inserts that people use to put in their windows to keep their house warmer. And there's a picture of one being put into a window. It's a simple wooden frame with plastic wrap and a gasket on it. And what does it do? Well, it keeps the warm air inside and the cold air outside. Windows are a huge loss of heat for our homes, but a lot of weatherization programs don't really tackle windows because replacing windows is very, very expensive. But with these inserts, they're pretty cheap, and you'll see why, because a lot of the labor is just volunteer labor. But they have the effect of, like making a single pane window, leaky window that we know we have all over Burlington, act like a nice double pane window that you just got. So it's a huge upgrade, but a way that is approachable for a lot of people. So how do we make them? So every year we have a community build. We have it in the fall, so end of October, beginning of November. We have about a week where all the participants come and we build these windows together, and we've got all these little jigs. So what's with the window dresser name? What's that? Window Dressers is a nonprofit organization. They're out of Maine. And what they do is they support communities like us. So the actual build and getting all the participants in Burlington, that's just done by volunteers. But Window Dressers is the organization that helps support us. Namely, they make all these jigs that we use for it and provide all the training materials and whatnot to help communities like us be able to do these events. So who participates? So everybody who signs up to get inserts, that's who participates. Whether they're coming to the actual build to build the inserts with us, which is a really special thing, because not only are you building these inserts that is helping everybody stay warmer, but you're actually meeting your neighbors, which is really, really awesome. Another one is, well, maybe you don't want to do build, or the times don't work. You have a morning shift and an afternoon shift. Well, you could bring lunch. We have a lunch in between the two shifts so that everybody can come and mingle together and meet each other's neighbors. And if some people sometimes are just away for the build, they can help organize or help measure windows in preparation for this. So who are these people? A lot of them are homeowners, but actually we get a good amount of renters and landlords as well, which is super cool, because usually weatherization work, it's really hard to crack that nut of the disincentive between landlords and renters. And really the nut is still there, but the fact that these are so low cost that anybody who's motivated, the barriers are gone. And one of the barriers, we talked about cost, but actually one of the big goals of this program, and in particular the Burlington build, is to make sure we're getting a large percentage of these inserts out to low, moderate income folks. So if people don't feel like they can pay for them, it's okay. They're free. We'll do up to 10 free window inserts each year for somebody. So cost is not a barrier, which is just amazing. And this has been really cool to see. In Vermont, the average has been about 38% of participants have gotten that special rate. Let's see, what else do I want to tell you guys? So this is just a map of showing where the different communities have builds. So why collaboration? Well, obviously, since BED is the Burlington's efficiency utility, there's a lot of aligned interests here. There's ability to do, I feel like, a lot of cross promotion, and we've talked to a couple of different BED staff who are really excited about this, and I think there's a lot of great ideas we could do. For me, you know, one of the things that I'm excited about is we do a lot of work with this group of people. We do a lot of touches with this certain group of people. First off, we're signing them up. Then we're going to their home and measuring the windows. And then they're coming to this build that they're spending, you know, 5 or plus hours together with. And I've always thought it would be really cool to be talking to them about what else can they do, because they're motivated to do it. But we're volunteers. There's only so much we could do. And so we haven't put that together. And so I feel like there's a lot of great synergies to have with the BED crew to be able to kind of multiply that effect. Plus also, I know the BED crew already has a whole network of outreach that you guys have, different programs. And again, we're only a volunteer crew. There's only so much outreach we can do. So we've been doing this for about 5 years in Burlington. And yeah, we've been doing about 150 to 250 inserts each year. And I want to do a lot more. So trying to find partners to help us kind of amp that up, figure that out. You know, we've talked a little bit with Jen, and we've talked a little bit with Ita. You know, we were saying, she was saying, or they were saying, oh, you should come to the Spark space, because one of our big issues is finding a space each year. So just finding ways to boost the effectiveness of this. And why this matters? Well, again, I'm a volunteer, so I didn't finish the slide. I just don't have enough time to do all that. But you know, we're trying to keep people warm. We're trying to save money. We're trying to reduce the amount of energy people have to use in their houses. And one story that stuck with me is early on, I think the first year, we had this lady who is homebound, like she couldn't get out of her house. So we measured her windows, and unfortunately, because she was homebound, she was basically bedbound. She wasn't able to come to the build. So we brought her inserts back and put them in. And her windows, because she was so cold, you know, and wanted to reduce the heat, she had taped her windows with cloth to just block them out. So basically she had no windows. And to be able to pull down these moldy cloths because of all the condensation and everything and put these in, it was just so huge. So that was one big story that was why it matters. So anyways, that's what we're doing. Love to talk more about it. And if you have any questions, love to.
Are these inserted inside or outside?
This is on the inside. So just in the frame of the window itself.
Yeah.
It's a friction fit. Obviously it adds another layer of insulation, but I find the bigger thing is a lot of windows are leaky. And so even double hung windows, you know, there's a lot of cheap double hung windows. And because of this, it friction fits and has a gasket that stops the leaks, which I find is a big thing.
Just
So
gonna-
I put these things in November,
Yeah.
and then pop them out in the spring, and then store them in the,
Yeah.
and just year after year, just keep on.
Yep.
What, are there any requirements? So say if I wanted to do this to my house
Yeah.
and contacted you, like, does it, is there, I would pay whatever the normal fee is, or whatever, however that works. Is it
Yeah.
And most people's windows, I know a lot of mine are custom sized, so, you know, is it on a per window basis, or is there kind of a general idea of like, well, you know, for 10 windows, a couple $100, or like, is there a ballpark sense of what a person would pay for that?
Yeah. So, yeah, people sign up. There's a little website sign up thing, and then we call you up and say, "Oh, we're gonna come measure your windows," because it's not just you. Everybody's windows are unique. It's almost even like people who have the same window, they're all different. So we have to measure them. And then, yeah, we'll tell you what that window costs. And it's basically per volume. You know, right? We're figuring out how much wood it's going to take. And usually that's been around like $50 to $70 per window for a normal size window. Yeah.
Just wanted to acknowledge you and say thank you for, and since we are in the commissioner's corner, are there other commissioners who have questions?
I just want to say thank you for your service. It's an incredible gift to the community. So I really appreciate what you're doing and hope we can spread that energy.
I'm just going to also say full disclosure, I'm on the Attachments Energy Rating Council, which is a national council for any window attachments. I'm on the board, so I just want to say that first. I do want to appreciate, you know, the community engagement piece, and the having a solution that can be low cost, no cost is a really great thing. And also to tackle the landlord renter paradigm, which is just a constant in any energy efficiency measure. Are you looking here, you know, do you have thoughts here today about, because typically if you have a measure that's going to enter the energy efficiency portfolio, it has to screen through cost and proven energy savings. Are you thinking more of this as a community engagement and trying to rally more folks to have solution? Or are you thinking, and I know you're volunteer, so if you don't have the answers, that's totally fine.
Cool.
But, or do you think that there's, do you have any other thoughts about potentially having it be a measure within the portfolio?
Great question. And actually, I think it already is. A lot of participants take advantage of the DIY rebate.
Right. Yep.
And so that is something that a lot of people use to defray the cost of it. So that's already something that's going on and is wonderful. I think right now the thought is like, okay, some of the BED staff know about it and think it's cool, or can we like empower them to follow their nose on this and be comfortable supporting it, and think about what are the ways that we can support each other and what kind of avenues we can do with that. I don't know, like I was just talking with Ida a little bit, and they rattled off several different organizations that we should be talking to. I'm like, okay, all right, my brain's already exploding. So there's more there.
Are you saying there could be an efficiency rating for the actual solution if further steps are taken?
No. Potentially. There's a lot of testing that has to be done by third-party independent labs for certain kinds of like rating or qualification. And I know that is part of the DIY rebate, at least for Efficiency Vermont. I'll speak to Efficiency Vermont because I know the detail of that one, but it is part of that. But we don't have it screened. It's just a kind of more community builder measure versus claiming specific savings for it.
Yep.
Any other commissioner questions?
Yeah, well, I guess, you know, the man has an ask, right? Is there an opportunity for some collaborative work? So that's a question I think it sounds like we're fairly positive on it. Sounds like he's got some buy-in from some staff. I guess the question that we have to answer, or have an opportunity to answer at some point, is to staff, is there, and then how, and if so, and if we agree that there is opportunity for collaboration here, then how do we go about that? And is that sounds like a big Chris Burns question, but
I think maybe a kind of easy way to go is, you know, Jacob, if you can connect with Mike, Mike does, among other things, communications work. I mean, I could see us, highlighting your work, social media, or we have a podcast. I don't know if Jen talked to you about
I
that.
think she just was talking to one of my other guys.
So we can highlight your work that way. But I could see us doing some social media maybe about the program or including it in some of our other materials. And then, vice versa, you mentioned kind of making sure folks are aware. I mean, maybe we could have some, I don't know if we still have like kind of handbills or any of those types of things with rebate information. But maybe we could give you some materials about other rebates that we have that could be available when folks are coming in to do these projects, so that they say, oh, maybe they want to learn about our energy assistance program, or maybe because you said 38% or low moderate income, they might qualify for that. Maybe they're interested in other measures for transportation or for heating or cooking or other things, lawn care, and we could make sure that we give you the right information for that too.
That sounds great.
Yeah, it's your energy festival.
Yes.
Yeah,
And
we've had you there before.
and that is like our best event too.
Yeah, we love to have you. I mean, I think we're gonna do it in August this year, and we're hoping, fingers crossed, to be in a bigger location than just 585 Pine Street. So more to come. But yeah, be glad to have you there as well. I think Damon was there for it a few years back. Yeah. So
I'll just note too, just to say it, not to, we don't have to end on this note, can keep going, but the performance is a piece where if you don't have third-party certification, moisture control, there's like just a bunch of pieces there. So I just want to say that out loud to make sure that how we included an energy efficiency portfolio, to make sure that we don't have problems that then, malign the rest of how energy efficiency measures are viewed. Is it
just to be clear, I am not proposing anything specific because of the points you're making. Other than obviously that, folks can use the DIY, that's great. But more so that we could just promote that this is an available opportunity, that if people in the community wanted to take advantage of it, that there's, free inserts for people who are not able to pay, I think is a great thing. And so we could do a little bit of cross promotion with people who read our materials or social media, and then vice versa. We'd love to share some things with you. I agree with the chair that a kind of more formal measure characterization would be a whole different set of steps, which may or may not be worthwhile, but yeah, that would be a Chris Burns question. Right. Yes.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for
Great.
coming and sharing.
Thanks so
really
much.
important community work.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Thanks a lot. Good stuff.
All right, I gotta
Mike, maybe
stop
you
sharing
follow
it.
up real quick. Yes. Thanks.
Okay. Moving past Commissioner's Corner, is there any other comments from Commissioner's Corner? Yep.
Who's
go
Chris Burns?
ahead.
Chris is our energy services leader, so he runs the group that manages our energy efficiency utility services.
Okay.
Yeah,
The name I haven't come across.
yeah, great person. He is retiring in June.
No kidding.
Yes, so we actually just,
Strange.
for your awareness, we'll be posting for that position in the near future. So if you see it posted, you'll know why. We're hoping to have somebody who might be able to come in and overlap with Chris for a few weeks or a month if we're lucky.
He has
Big loss there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
been here a long time.
he has. He is a 35-year plus
Yeah, it's
BEDer.
seasoned.
So he's given us quite a bit of service.
And we might see him one more time, because I think we're on a quarterly docket now with
Yeah. I believe you will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we might get to see him. See those. Okay. Any other Commissioner Corner comments, and we'll move on to the GM update? Okay.
All right. Thank you. Wanted to note, and I know we'll be talking about the calendar year 26 McNeil budget. We have a few updates relative to that. As part of our last joint owners meeting, we also had the financials from calendar year 25. And just because we've had so much conversation about the various, financials, the plant, even though those are not the financials for BED specifically, we have our own financials. I did want to note that in calendar 25, pre-depreciation and interest, the plant itself had a net income of over $2 million, whereas the year before it had a more significant net loss. And, there's a variety of factors go into that, but the biggest one being, in my view, energy prices being up last year. And we're seeing that even more so in the first, month and a few weeks here of 2026. We've seen kind of round-the-clock prices on the ISO grid in most of January that were extremely elevated compared to what we've seen over the last 4 or 5 years, with the exception maybe of the 2022 kind of lead up to the war in Ukraine. So I know Lincoln's here and others. We have Seth online, but we had a lot of great work at the generation team over the last month plus to make sure that the plant was online and running, providing us economic benefit when these prices are high. We were able to, I know we had a couple of things we talked about in December where we were on and off, but in January, after the first few days, we were on for the entire time. We've been on in February. Team's doing a great job of keeping things moving there. We've also had just quite a number of calls on our gas turbine, which if you recall is our peaker plant at the waterfront, which used to run on oil. Now it runs on B20 mixed biodiesel and oil. We're moving it towards in the very near future, hopefully with some work that we're doing with the state. We'd like to move it towards R99 renewable diesel as a fuel, but we've seen the GT, as we call it, has been called on more times than I can remember in a single period. And we've seen it just regionally. If you've looked at the mix, it's moderating today because the temperatures are moderating a bit. But over the last month, I've seen a number of days where oil was, 25 to 40+% of the regional mix at given times, which typically it would be not even 1% of the mix. And this all goes to the idea that natural gas is, diverted for heating on these colder days. Power plants don't have firm contracts for it, and therefore the region ends up going to these oil-fired facilities in large part, which then also drives up the cost. So very interesting dynamics that we've seen with some of the more colder temperatures and some of the winter storms over the last month. But a lot of appreciation for our team at McNeil and a team of folks who have been working at the GT as well for keeping those facilities running. Legislative. Oh, yeah.
Real quick, just curious, what does the GT provide that McNeil doesn't provide in terms
It's
of
a different kind
energy,
of
or
facility.
How long do you have it?
Yeah, very, very different in a lot of ways. So McNeil, during this period of time, is a 24/7 type facility. We're going to run it, pretty much around the clock, and its economics support that. The GT is more expensive to run. It's running on a liquid fuel, which is all things equal going to be more expensive than running on wood chips. And it's more of a reliability asset for the region to know that it's available. So it gets paid to be available essentially, even though it doesn't run a whole lot. When it runs, it's running during times when, there's a need where prices have elevated to a certain extent. So over the course of the year, it's going to produce very little energy, but its value is essentially as a reliability unit. And even though it runs very few hours, and even though it's not really part of our being 100% renewable, it's sort of an asset outside of that. We want to make it 100% renewable by moving to the renewable diesel. But yeah, it's a very different kind of market for that asset and different way that we operate it. And maybe if it was much cheaper renewable fuel source, maybe it would run more like McNeil, but because it's a liquid fuel, it's only going to be economic a certain number of hours a year. Yeah.
Would you just be willing to share your perspective on the higher prices? I understand how cold it's been and the shift to more natural gas use. I also was thinking in my head that oil prices are down, at least over the last year. So
yeah.
How are you thinking about ISO prices, and what are your team's thoughts on kind of the next year ahead? Will it be sustained in winter at the same rates?
I mean, it's very difficult to predict with clarity without knowing what the weather and other things are going to be in terms of where it's going to be next year, let's say. But I would say the last 5 or so years, we've had pretty moderate winters. We really haven't had a whole lot of cold weather. And obviously what's driving ISO is not going to be the weather in Vermont, but the weather in Boston, the weather in Connecticut, and the load centers of the region. And so what I've seen, personally observed, is, when the temperature's dropping below 30 in Boston and it's snowing, you're driving demand up. We're seeing those higher forecasted demands. Even still, it hasn't been extremely cold in those areas. It's certainly been very cold here with the wind chill and other things, but I don't think we've seen an historic level of cold or a sustained historic level of cold. We've seen a couple of Arctic blasts. We saw some snowstorms, and even with that, we saw round the clock prices that were $200 and above for much of January and into February, moderating a bit today. We saw a couple times where prices in real time were going to $600 or $900, things like that, which is really very high. And in those environments, you're better off, all things equal, having power generation than being a buyer of power generation. So I think we're typically better situated, all things equal, than we would be, if we were a buyer. The other piece just to keep in mind is, we had a bunch of offshore wind in the region that was supposed to come online that's been caught up in a lot of back and forth at the federal level. We're hopeful it'll still come online, obviously, but the two big things, other than just bringing in more fossil fuel to the region, which is something we don't want to see, the two big things that can come in that might moderate prices would be, a chunk of offshore wind or more hydro connections from outside of the region, from Canada or elsewhere. And, there was one project line that came on recently in Maine for hydro that's having some interesting kind of price dynamics in Maine because it's coming in there. And obviously with the offshore wind, we haven't seen it materialize yet. I think all 5 of the projects that got stop orders had their orders reversed at the court level. I don't know if that'll be appealed and where that goes, but those are some of the things to just be thinking about. That's all outside of the idea of like if we have a data center located in New England or, which is something the legislature is discussing and hasn't happened yet. So, I mean, there's a lot of dynamics in play, but for the very near term, I think having generation resources is a good thing, all
But-
things equal.
Darren,
So
can I
you're
add
saying
just
you
one?
don't- It is partially due to cold, but what are the other factors that you're saying these like spot prices are? Is it
Well,
demand increase or is it?
Can-
It's demand
Darren, can I
increase
add
driven
a
by the cold,
comment?
basically.
Darren, can I add a comment on that?
Yeah, go ahead.
So it's not just the fuel. So ISO New England's prices are based on the marginal unit that's required to serve the load in New England. It's not the bid price, it's the bid price of the last unit needed. So when you see, oil providing 30% of the generation, that's the marginal fuel, almost certainly, because oil is more expensive on a heat content than natural gas is, usually, not always, okay? But the other thing too to keep in mind is the function of the efficiency of the unit that's burning that fuel too. And when you're burning oil, you're not typically relying on any units that were built in the recent past. Nobody is building new oil-fired units. So, I mean, ours was put in place in the early 70s, right? Some of the bigger oil units are probably of a similar vintage. So when you kick into oil, you're also kicking into lower efficiency units too. But they're also frequently some of the faster spooling up units. So they can react to changing loads, to changing supply to the natural gas plants. So, I don't think these dynamics are going to change drastically necessarily, even with the injection of wind, because at the end of the day, ISO's got to keep the lights on, and those fast start units are going to be important to back up renewable resources too. So, and as Darren said, this was not minus 20. This was in Burlington minus 10, maybe. And in Boston, it wasn't that cold. So it could have been worse.
Okay. No, those are good things to be talking about, and things that are on our mind. In the legislative context, I know we've talked about the Efficiency Modernization Act. We did testify on that in the House Energy Committee back in January. We testified, the department testified. We had a little bit of back and forth. There was ultimately support from the department for giving BED flexibility to use its TEPF funds because they know that we have a very limited oil and propane customer base, that we need to be having flexibility. Their preference was to use the funds to essentially combine with Vermont Gas on weatherization programs. Our preference was to use them in ways that we've been using them for emission reduction programs around geothermal and EVs and EV charging and heat pumps. We came to a compromise of sorts that we've shared with the committee, and we're hopeful that there could be a committee bill in the near future related to this, where a portion of the funds would be available for the things that we're interested in advancing. A portion would be available for weatherization and thermal efficiency, including, we don't want to just simply add funds to what VGS is doing, although there may be rationales for doing that in certain instances, but we would have within this space the ability to support asbestos remediation, building remediation, knob and tube wiring remediation, other things that are preventing maybe a weatherization project from advancing. We can also do other thermal efficiency projects within that space, and we can help income qualified customers upgrade their electric panel, which is something we've talked about wanting to do as part of our broader mission, but also as part of this miscellaneous fee conversation. We had that. So There is a bill hopefully being put forward in the near future, and we appreciate the department working with us to find a good balance between the various priorities there. So stay tuned. We'll have more to share on that. Regulatory update, a few different things going on. So there was the Christmas Eve docket that we talked about where the PUC asked whether we should have an early performance assessment of the efficiency utility because relatedly, we had missed the minimum performance requirement for our oil and propane customers because we have so few of them. We almost never meet that metric for the last several performance periods, among other things. And the department did file comments in that docket saying they do not see a need for an early performance assessment. They're doing a performance assessment on all 3 efficiency utilities coming up next year. They're starting that process this summer. There's efficiency to having all 3 go through the process at the same time and have the same, vendor support that effort. So that was filed. We don't have a decision from the PUC on that yet, but we appreciated the department's perspective. The DPS did put forward an RFP finally about the business process review that we've been talking about for a while. That has been issued. I've shared it, I think, over email with the commission. So it's public document. You can go on their website. And it is largely similar to what they had filed in the PUC context. Timing standpoint, it looked like they would have somebody on hand in April, roughly speaking. And then I would anticipate that for the duration of the year, we'd be working with that consultant, hoping to get recommendations and other things and being able to kind of move forward with that process. Excuse me. The demand resource plan, which is our 3-year efficiency budget process plan, we're going through a discovery right now, which is a lengthy process. You're probably familiar with your colleagues at Efficiency Vermont going through the same thing. So we're filing discovery responses to the first round discovery probably tomorrow. And then FY26 rate case, we had a few questions from the PUC hearing officer, which we've responded to. So we're hopeful to be able to resolve that. And again, that's a 4.5% rate request that we anticipated could be lowered to something more like 4.33% potentially based on removing one-time costs that were in the FY25 rate case, not the 26, but essentially removing those from this year's rate case. So we should have hopefully some outcomes there in the near future. And lastly, and on a happy note, some of us got to visit the new Burlington High School. It's under construction, but we got to have a little bit of an early tour from the BED team, particularly focused on the energy elements within the school. And I think it's going to be an outstanding building, I think, for the community for a variety of reasons. But from an energy standpoint, there's EV charging in the back parking lot, level 2 chargers, fairly good number of them. Within the building, a geothermal heating and cooling system. There is a natural gas backup boiler that I expect will be very seldom used, if at all. But a geothermal primary heating and cooling system, heat pump systems on the upper floors, supplementing the geothermal, an all-electric kitchen where students will be eating, and heat pump water heaters that were commercial scale heat pump water heaters, a number of them supporting the building as well. So in a lot of ways, just a really great example of what a modern electrified building can look like. We're pleased to be supporting it with incentives and with our geothermal test well program. And just, I think once it's open for the broader public, I know that not most people's focus will not be on the energy systems, will be on the student facilities and the gym and the theater and all the other great things that are there. But underlying it, some really great energy systems that we're really, as a community, I think could be very proud of. So look forward to seeing it in action in the not distant future. And that's everything I've got.
Thank you. Any last questions for Manager Springer? Great. All right. Moving on to financials.
Good evening. These are the financial results for December 2025. We had in December a net loss of $460,000 as compared to a budgeted net loss of $41,000, so about $420,000 worse than budget. Moving down from the top, sales to customers were favorable by just under $300,000. Other revenues, not power supply revenues and not sales, were modestly down $51,000. So sales were helping us. So our problems came from the operating expense area of the budget. Net power supply was unfavorable for the month of $513,000. Within that line, transmission was a little bit unfavorable by $83,000. Fuel was favorable by $382,000, with McNeil under budget by 35% being the primary contributor to that. And then because McNeil was under budget, because Winooski 1 production was also under budget, and because First Light production was under budget, we were essentially a net purchaser of energy in December instead of a net seller as we had budgeted to be. So purchase power was unfavorable by $813,000.
What was the driving factor for, again, McNeil under budget for this one?
A couple of mechanical issues. I think there was we discussed that in January, the gearbox that failed, and then a grate.
Yeah, we had
Or the-
2 instances where McNeil was
Yeah.
offline for a couple periods of time in December. So all things equal, we
But
would have
this
run the
month
whole
it-
time.
This is December.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
What should we put in?
January will be,
Right.
like McNeil January production, you'll see a significant increase relative to December. Although the dynamic that Emily just stated, I think continues
Right.
into January, because we do have, even though McNeil's running, we do have less power than we would anticipate. Like, we haven't executed the Relevate contract yet, for example. First Light expired at the end of December. Winooski 1's producing less. So that dynamic that Emily just mentioned, you'll see that again in January.
Correct.
Yeah.
But the McNeil things are anomalies, hopefully, or
Yes.
things.
Relative to January, because that's already happened, we could say yes.
Okay.
Relative to February, we're doing everything we can to make sure that's the case as well.
Okay.
Other operating and maintenance expense was $397,000 over budget for December. Year to date, it's off only by 1.65%. Depreciation slightly over budget, taxes slightly better than budget, under budget, yes. Moving down to other income and deductions, that was favorable by $275,000 due to the timing of customer contributions for capital projects and grant income. And then year to date, favorable variance, actual net income of 2.4 million as compared to the budgeted amount of 1.177 million. So 1.2 million roughly better than budget for the year. Yeah.
How is pilot calculated, and can that be adjusted?
It's kind of a long explanation, but the short version is that it is calculated. My understanding is really a question for the assessor's office, but my understanding is it's calculated just like any other commercial property would be calculated. So we provide a property value, and this tax department provides the assessor's office a property value, and it's multiplied by the tax rate. So our pilot bill looks like any other business's tax bill from the city. I did want to note, Darren just mentioned this, but we are watching the year-end forecast carefully. Actuals year to date are very favorable versus budget, which is a great place to be. We do know that January power supply, we were short when we budgeted to be long due to Winooski 1, Relevate not signed, and McNeil, while running well in January, is not running at full output, and which I think will be discussed later, the reasons why. So all of those factors combining, power supply will probably not be on budget for January. And also all this lower production in prior periods is going to ding rec revenue significantly for the remainder of the fiscal year. So I'm not sounding alarm bells. I'm just letting you know that we are monitoring closely. And in March, probably after we have February results, we'll be kind of sitting down to see where we think we are and whether we need to do any adjustments between then and the end of the fiscal year to make sure we land net income and the ratios in a good place for June 30. Any questions before I go to the next page?
Just on that point, like, my guess is that power supply will look again like it does here, but my guess also would be that we should have a positive variance on sales to customers in all likelihood, given how cold it was. And we should, because McNeil's producing closer to 45 megawatts than 50 because we need to replace the heat sink, which is one of the items we'll be talking about in the calendar year budget. But, you know, even with that, you're probably looking at some fuel reduction, which we haven't really accounted for in our forward-looking forecasts yet, but we are looking into. So there's just a couple of big moving pieces that, you know, 6 months in to be where we are is good, but we're thinking ahead of, you know, where's it going to land 6 months from now? What are the big moving factors? And we'll have a greater clarity around that once we get through January, February, which are kind of dynamic from a power supply standpoint. So.
James, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, this is extremely unusual circumstances that Darren was mentioning. We are seeing a case where wholesale market prices for January for energy were at or near our retail rates. So we're actually in a position where retail sales don't help us as much as you might think in January, because we are paying, you know, 19 cents to buy the wholesale power to sell at 19 cents type of thing. So just be aware that that's how expensive January was.
Any other questions on this page? Okay, thanks. Oops. Scroll the right screen. Here we go. So capital spending for December year to date at 25% of the full year fiscal budget. The most recent reforecast we did in December is projecting to have a capital spend of like 14.1 million, so to not spend that whole budget. I'll also mention here that as of the end of January, we had about $784,000 remaining in the revenue bond construction fund from 2022. So I expect we'll be able to get reimbursement for January capital expenditures and maybe, you know, some or most of February. And then the 2026 revenue bond issuance is currently scheduled for March 18th. So that timing should work out nicely. And I'll move down to December cash was 12.649 million. That compares favorably to our budgeted cash position at this point in the year of 12.585. So we were just about on target, a little bit above target for December cash. And then the Moody's rating factors, debt service coverage at 4.6, adjusted debt service coverage at 1.14, and then days cash on hand with a line of credit 141. And I'm happy to take any questions. I didn't know, Commissioner Kenny, if this would be a good time, if you wanted to cover the difference between the DSCR and the ADSCR, you know, for the whole commission at this time?
Yeah.
Sure. So you, Commissioner Kenny, had asked about this last meeting. And so the two major differences between the DSCR and the ADSCR. The DSCR is stipulated by the general bond resolution that governs our revenue bond issuances. And the ADSCR is the coverage ratio that Moody's calculates for their scorecard for our credit rating. In the ADSCR, you deduct the payment in lieu of taxes from your net revenues available for debt service. So you have less net revenues available for debt service. And the coverage ratio applies to the debt service on all of your obligations, your geo bonds, your revenue bonds, and any other loans or long-term obligations you may have. Whereas the top debt service coverage ratio, because it's related to the bond resolution that has to do with the revenue bonds, it's only considering your revenue bond debt service coverage ratio. So the ADSCR is so much lower because it's essentially covering more debt service with less revenue. I'm happy to answer any other questions.
I had some, what about the further questions that I had on that of just, I guess, considering that difference, I think, and who knows what's gonna happen with ISO prices or hopefully McNeil, production is strong, like at what number would you consider would be something to worry about for the adjusted coverage ratio?
I would say we ideally will end the year at a 1.2. That's where we like to be. I think that's where Moody's is sort of minimally comfortable with us being. In the 1 point, teens where it is right now, would not be the end of the world. It wouldn't be as good as a 1.2. If that got below 1.1 for June 30, I think that would be a flag for Moody's. Also keep in mind that the number that appears on our Moody's scorecard is the 3-year average. So, and they do that intentionally so that one wonderful year and one terrible year doesn't dictate your entire scorecard. But that does, provide some smoothing in the case of an anomalous year. So yeah, we're targeting, I think, a 1.2 if at all possible for the end of the year.
So just for a little bit of context, we started tracking these things during the KISS administration. The commission did. During the KISS administration, I believe, when Burlington Telecom was going through all kinds of turmoil and stuff, and the city's credit rating was tanking. And so that's when the commission decided that, and the city's credit rating and Burlington Electrics are tied together. So it was at that point that we decided that we wanted to make sure that we didn't fall into those difficulties. So that's just context as to new commissioners as to why we track these indices.
How far down did they fall during the KISS administration on a adjusted debt service
That's
ratio?
a great question. I have no idea, but
I don't know the answer to that. I know that our credit rating as an organization was lower, and the city's was significantly lower. And it's almost impossible for ours to ever be higher than the city's. Typically, we would be a notch or two below the city. And definitely BED was not A-rated. We were in the BAA range at that point. And then it was during the middle of the last decade and then into kind of the end of the last decade where we saw the credit rating be able to move up. And it's a push-pull with the ADSCR. You don't want to see it below 1. It's below 1, it means you're not really bringing in as much as you need to cover all of the different pieces. Emily's exactly right in terms of where it's been recently and the comfort level for that. But, if you wanted to get a credit rating upgrade from A3 to a higher rating, you'd have to push that ADSCR, to the 1.5 or 1.6 or 1.7 range. And to do that would probably require rate increases that would not be worth the additional interest rate benefit of getting that higher credit rating, even more so now that we can finance using the Vermont Bond Bank, which has an even higher credit rating than we do. So, it's a useful metric in a lot of ways, but it is, it has limitations too.
Yeah, I think it just shows that cushion that we have in case things,
Yeah.
in a market that's a little bit confusing right now, I think.
I think during the pandemic, we may have kind of been in that more troublesome area for at least for a few quarters, I recall.
Yeah, and 2019 was not a good year either because of the way the accounting had to be done for the McNeil overhaul. So we ended up expensing a large item that we hadn't planned to expense.
Right.
So that threw the net income off. So.
Yep.
But yeah, but I think Commissioner Kenny, to, you know, I think we've touched on some of the questions you had around the impact of ISO New England prices, you know, to the extent that we are long and can sell energy in the winter, those are beneficial to us, right? To the extent that you asked about McNeil's availability. Availability is when the resource is available to be called upon by ISO New England. So generally, we want that to be as high as possible. Capacity factor is the degree to which McNeil produces as much as it is possible of producing, right? If McNeil had a lower capacity factor that was related to being offline at high price times, that would be negative for BED, all things equal. You asked about flat load growth. That's essentially what we're experiencing. Our load is growing very slowly. Current projections I've seen for the FY27 budget and beyond are around 0.5 to 1% per year. So essentially flat, and that does not help the ADSCR because without load growth, your revenue doesn't grow without rate increases, right? And then you also asked about the ADSCR and kind of debt service needs after we issue the 2026 bonds. I do have a graph on that I could share. I haven't received indicative pricing yet for the 2026 issuance, so I don't really know what our debt service is going to be. But I can show you, this is our total debt service, GO bonds, revenue bonds, everything. And you can see there's a pretty steep little cliff right here in FY31. And I know that, you know, with this 2026 issuance, we will be deferring principal for the first 5 years. So we'll start paying interest right away, but the first principal payment won't come until FY31, which is by design, right when you get that little cliff. So we won't be adding principal payments during these next 5 years at the higher levels. They will only kick in FY31. And based on if the 2022 bond is any indication, I think annual debt service could be, I don't know, let's call it low million, low 1 million, 1.2, 1.3 maybe million a year once we start paying principal. And these bars, the horizontal lines are kind of every 2 million. So you can imagine that, growing a little bit, but not to the levels that we'll be paying and needing to cover it for the next 5 years. So I hope that helps. Welcome.
Thank you very much. I believe you're up for the next
Yes.
topic as well. Okay, thank you.
I'd like to thank Kathy Jo from Paul Frank and Collins for joining us again. Paul Frank and Collins are the city's bond counsel. And what we have to propose to the commission tonight is supplemental resolution number 20 to the general bond resolution. As a refresher, the general bond resolution was adopted by the board in 1981. And it does allow for, it has a provision that allows the board with the additional consent of the city council and the bond trustee to amend the resolution. And some amendments can take effect right away. Other amendments require 2/3 or bondholders of 2/3 of the outstanding principal to consent. And the bond trustee, we could ask the bond trustee to, mail letters to every bondholder and try to obtain their consent that way. That's quite an endeavor, would be fairly expensive. So what we've typically tried to do is, coincident with the issuance of new debt, amend the resolution and say to prospective bondholders, you know, if you purchase these bonds, you will be consenting to the bond resolution as amended by this latest set of changes. And then you get your way towards the 2/3, and then as older debt matures, you at some point arrive at your 2/3 consent, and the provisions and amendments that you've made will go into effect at that time. So if the commission adopts these and then the council approves them in early March, they still will not be in effect until we reach that 2/3 mark. And what we're planning to do is to ask the Vermont Bond Bank, as the issuer of this 2026 $20 million revenue bond, to consent on behalf of its bondholders. And then they also are the bondholders for the refinancing we just did last summer. And so with the 20 million here and then the 6.5-ish that we did last summer, that will get us to about 50% by Kathy's calculations. And then we would simply wait a few years for older debt to mature. And that would get us to the 66 2/3. So issuance of new debt is an opportune time to sort of look through the bond resolution language and see if there's any provisions that could be modernized or updated or streamlined. So Kathy and I did that, and we consulted with PFM, our debt advisors, to make sure that what we were thinking about would be, you know, not detrimental in any way to BED's offerings in the marketplace, because PFM is advising other utilities, other municipalities around, you know, bond issuances. They're advising on the creation of new indentures, new bond resolutions for entities that don't have revenue bond issuance capability. So they're pretty current on the latest and greatest kind of terms and the state of the market and best practice. Some of our ideas did not meet that test, so they're not before you tonight. But we're proposing 5 changes, 4 of which were indicated in your memo and in your packet. And then the 5th one, Bond Counsel suggested just yesterday. So we would be asking the commission to, in your motion, if you choose to adopt this supplemental resolution number 20, to indicate that amendment with your motion. So the 5 changes are: first, to amend the debt service reserve fund requirements, which would give the city and BED the option to issue future bonds with or without a debt service reserve fund. And it would be determined at that time in the supplemental resolution authorizing the issuance. And then the size of the debt service requirement for those issuances would be changed to be the least of 3 test, consistent with current US Treasury regulations. Right now, the bond resolution requires that the debt service reserve be the maximum annual debt service. Third, it would give us the flexibility to fund the debt service reserve fund with a line of credit or another credit facility in lieu of cash. It would modify the actual versus budgeted operating expense spending requirements. And then the 5th one is really an administrative efficiency change. So when these changes take effect, when we reach that 2/3 of bondholders, the bond trustee is required to notify all the bondholders. And currently, they are required to give notice by placing some sort of ad or notice in. And so the change here is really the last sentence that reads, "In lieu of the foregoing, they may give notice by publication, providing notice via the electronic municipal market access system of the Municipal Securities Rulemaking Board or any other electronic format." So this should be an efficiency for the bond trustee and hopefully a cost savings as well. So that is the 5th change. I think.
And just to
Yeah,
add
go ahead.
really quickly on that 5th change, So the whole, the general bond resolution was adopted in 1981 when people still kind of read the paper and maybe had the paper delivered to their homes. Nowadays, the easiest way to disseminate information to bondholders is through the Emma platform that is maintained by the MSRB. That's how, so for revenue bonds, we have certain continuing disclosure obligations. The city has them for geo bonds as well. And so every time, we need to disclose something to bondholders, we publish that on Emma.
Kind of like legal notices in 7 days or something.
Yeah, kind of. And it's, anyone can access it. It's open to the public. With the Globe, you probably need a subscription. So it's, just generally more available, and it's targeted specifically towards the bondholders. So with the Globe, you're kind of like just hoping that people see it in the paper. But with Emma, it will actually be, the notice will reach the bondholders.
There's like notifications or whatever changes, or you can subscribe to certain, like if something in there, new information, things like that.
Yeah.
Any other questions? That was to,
Well, let me say questions
ahead.
on the whole thing, because I sent some questions early on. Just
Yeah.
trying to understand this, because I mean, I really, it's like struggling to understand this, but, so just did a little AI checking and to try to help me understand exactly where this was, basically what kind of questions that we should be asking. And it's, I guess the least of three is the one that probably intrigued me the most in terms of, if I understand it correctly, which I may not, we're basically saying that it's going to be a lower average debt that we're looking at versus the maximum possible debt. So it's potentially giving us some leeway. And so some of the looking I was doing was saying, yeah, it increases the risk a little bit, but not a substantial amount. So I guess one of my questions was, does this have any impact with the PUC at all? Just because if there's an issue with the rates changing, as that's one of the risks that I was seeing, was that it increases it, but probably not a large amount, but there could be a ratepayer impact on this. So my only question was, is this something that the PUC should know about before it's done?
So I'd say a couple things in response to that. First of all, I think the least of three test, because it is the least, right, should all things equal reduce ratepayer rate pressure, because we will have flexibility to fund a debt service reserve fund at a lower amount, right, than the maximum annual debt service. So that will, because we're essentially transferring cash either from operating reserves or from bond proceeds to
Yeah, I like
fund,
that.
right?
I like the line of credit thing.
Yeah,
so
to fund, well, but I'm saying for example, this 20 million that we're about to issue in March, right? There is a debt service reserve requirement for that, which will be equal to the maximum annual debt service, because this least of three language is not in effect right now. So that addition to the debt service reserve will come out of bond proceeds, which means that the electric department will have less money available in the construction fund to put toward capital projects. So the least of three allows for that debt service reserve fund to be less than that, right? Which, all things equal, should give the electric department, more bond proceeds to invest, or more liquidity, by taking less from operating cash.
And I agree with that.
Okay.
Just from my understanding though, why would, I understand as I understand it, the maximum is sort of like, it's a risk base, but what is the true risk here in terms of, we're saying, why would a maximum be put in there in the first place, that this is the most we would have to pay, versus now we're saying we're gonna, and I agree that it says the federal guidelines are saying the least of three is the way to go, but I don't know, just for a little education as to what's the difference between those two.
Yeah,
Why?
I can speak to kind of where this is coming from and the basis for the debt service reserve fund requirement. So Essentially, your debt service reserve fund is a fund where, you know, you're putting money in. It acts as kind of like security
Yeah,
for
For the bond
bonds
holders,
that
yeah,
you
because
issue.
you're asking them to take a little bit of risk by
Yeah.
saying, well, we're gonna reduce this a little bit. So,
Yeah,
I'm sorry,
exactly,
go ahead.
exactly. So, many times when we issue bonds, the purchaser of the bond likes to see that there is, you know, a debt service reserve fund, maybe because they want that additional security. And so you fund it at the time that the bonds are issued. You fund it to a certain level. And historically for BED, that's been maximum annual debt service. And that money just kind of sits there, right?
Yeah, and I guess I mean, I know historically it's been that, but why would you go to that conservative level? I guess maybe is what I'm trying to get at. Why go hyper conservative?
Yeah, I'm
now
not,
we're actually trying to make sense to go not hyper conservative.
Sure. I think this may have been, and I'm not 100% sure as to why we said it that way in 1981. It's possible that that's just where the market was. That's
Okay.
what
There was a
potential
requirement at the
purchasers,
time.
yeah,
Okay.
what potential purchasers wanted and were looking for.
Okay.
In any event, you know, that's since changed. The least of the three, basically, it comes from Treasury regulations. Generally, when you issue tax exempt bonds, the IRS wants you to spend that money as quickly as possible. And if you don't spend that money quickly enough, you're supposed to yield restrict it. So you're not supposed to kind of invest it in higher yield investments compared to, you know, the rate at which you issue the bonds.
Yep.
And then to the extent that you don't yield restrict, you're supposed to return that money back to the IRS, that delta.
Yeah.
The IRS understands that, you know, a lot of times we have this requirement where we may want a debt service reserve fund just as additional security. And so, you know, that money could come from bond proceeds, and hence, you know, it would be subject to these arbitrage rebate requirements. So the IRS made an exception, and the exception is, you know, you can set aside money in a reasonably required debt service reserve fund. But you got to make sure, you know, the money that you put aside is the least of max annual debt service, 125% of average annual debt service, or 10% of the aggregate proceeds of the bonds. So that's kind of like the IRS safe harbor for like money that you can just kind of keep in a fund, and you don't have to yield restrict, you don't have to, you know, pay arbitrage on. And so that's where this update comes from.
Okay, so it's beneficial also for the IRS then, because they want to see the tax.
Yeah, it brings us into line with what the IRS.
Yeah, because when you mentioned 1981, it's like, oh yeah, I remember 1981. What was the interest rate back then? Yeah. Okay, I understand.
Right. Great.
The other thing I wanted to mention with respect to your question about the commission is that I think the commission's role in this would come only in a rate-making proceeding, right? Where we were making a rate request that had something to do with liquidity needs, right? And that would be their avenue.
'Cause the concern is you could overextend yourself potentially, right?
Right,
Yeah,
right,
okay.
yep. And
Which
also,
we're not proposing, but you could potentially. Okay.
right. Also, just by way of information, the BED's authority to issue revenue bonds and general obligation bonds stems from the city charter,
Okay.
which takes precedence over PUC statute
So
and
it's
rule.
second layer.
So other utilities in the state do need commission approval to issue debt. Burlington Electric does not.
Okay.
So the commission's role in overseeing
Okay.
debt issuances is a bit different.
Okay. So it's not, PUC is not required in this case because the city overrides that need. Okay.
Yeah, that's my understanding.
All right. Thank you.
Great. Any last questions before we move to
No,
motion?
that's good.
May I just reflect to make sure I understand the revision to the motion? Is it adding to the draft I'm asking about? So is it, I move that the Burlington Electric Commission approve the adoption of Supplemental Resolution 20 as well as the amendment to the Supplemental Resolution 20 to the general bond resolution as presented?
I think it would be that you would adopt supplemental resolution 20 with the amendment that was proposed.
With amendment as proposed. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Just want to make sure I get that right. Okay. Is there anyone who'd like to amend this?
Yeah.
Amendment as proposed.
you could say with the amendment to section 13.6 that was proposed.
Amendment
So,
to
yeah.
section 13.6. Thank you everyone for your
Does
grace.
that screw that up with section? Or is that, maybe that's a bad idea.
I would say probably with the addition of, I'm trying to think of how best
Maybe
to
Kathy's
most
idea
clearly-
was the best idea in the first place, so let's go with your suggestion.
With the amendment as proposed?
Yeah.
Great. Okay, so it's
I forgot about
this
part.
and I added this stuff. That's the arrow. Mm-hmm. Okay.
I moved
Thank you,
that the-
Commissioner King.
Yes, I move that the Burlington Electric Commission approve the adoption of supplemental resolution 20 with the amendment as proposed to the general bond resolution as presented and recommended, as presented, period, and recommend its adoption to the Board of Finance and City Council. Not period, but comma.
Do we have a second? Any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All four ayes. Motion passes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank you.
both.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay. Next we have Lincoln. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Pleased to be here again, seeing you again. Introduce myself for the full audience. My name's Lincoln Sprague. I'm the Director of Generation, Engineering, and Maintenance for Burlington Electric. A big part of that is McNeil Station, and I'm here today to present for a vote additions to the 2026 calendar year budget for McNeil. We did already have a budget approved by the joint owners and by the Electric Commission, but this now for review tonight are three additional items that came about that needed to be added. Now, these three items were reviewed and approved by the joint owners at our recent meeting on December 1st. And so now I'll just provide a description of the three items and then be happy to answer any questions about them. The first one is a capital expense of $1,393,000. This is for a replacement of the heat sink in our RSCR system. The RSCR system reduces nitrous oxide emissions. And what happened over the last 18 years of its service is some ash carryover from the boiler ended up over time developed airflow restrictions in the heat sink, which ultimately, as of today, has resulted in a loss, a derating of the entire plant of approximately 5 megawatts. And so by replacing this heat sink, we'll restore the airflow to the initial design and build and the full plant to its full capacity from approximately 45 megawatts to 50 megawatts. So in a way, I see this as this dollar amount an investment to gain 5 megawatts of power from the plant.
Is there a time frame on that? Is that already
As of
in progress?
April, it'll be during the April outage.
It's
Right.
part of this budget, right? Okay.
Yeah, it would be a single project performed during the spring outage in April.
We should just mention too, we have the NOx catalyst replacement also scheduled for April. And that was already in the budget, already part of the revenue bonds, et cetera. But, you know, the team wants to make sure that we don't put the catalyst in and not deal with the heat sink and then have to go back in and deal with it later. So this is timely from that standpoint, not to mention that we want to be back to full output. Yeah.
Like a critical order of operations there. The second line item here is a payment for turbine blade carrier, which is a major component for our turbine that's been in service since the plant was built. And this came about as we are regularly working with General Electric, who now serves as the original equipment manufacturer. And this is a very long lead item. And this payment is getting us in line on their books for this item to have the GE do the engineering work, the manufacturing work, the sourcing materials, and have us in the queue for production of this part so that it can be delivered and installed for an outage in 2028. And what happened is through a meeting with GE and assessing our timeline and what our plans are for regular maintenance of the turbine overall, this topic came up as based on their lead times and the changes in prices that are occurring month by month, increases in prices, we decided it's prudent now to start this process, get on their books so that we don't see any further increases in price for this part or further delays or longer lead times that could appear if we were to wait longer.
If I could just add on that point too, this is a more expensive item than the amount that's listed here. What we're trying to manage is kind of being in the queue, like Lincoln said, for this long lead time item that wouldn't be installed until a major overhaul in 2028, while also balancing that we have an RFI out right now for different technologies that we might utilize at McNeil, and not wanting to lock ourselves into too much without having future flexibility, particularly given that we've had negotiations with the joint owners in the past, and we might resume those, to be able to have potentially full ownership of the plant. So what we negotiated with GE to deal with that issue is a payment schedule where this would be the only payment for this calendar year. We made an initial smaller payment in December, and then we would have no payments until 2027, and then a schedule would resume in 2027. So we have some time between making this payment and having to make the next one. And if we cancel at any time for any reason, we would only owe the payments that we've made plus work in progress towards the next proximate payment. So it's capping essentially our exposure. If for some reason we decided to do something completely different, we wouldn't be locked into any particular future. But at the same time, we feel responsibility. This was something that was identified in the 2019 outage as being an issue within the turbine blade. And then, wasn't able to be addressed then because we didn't have the parts. And they only take this thing apart typically every 7 years. It'll probably end up being more like 8 to 9 years by the time we do it next. And part of that's based on runtime and other things. But so it would be wholly irresponsible of us not to deal with it during the next overhaul if we're going to continue to have the facility available to us in whatever capacity we want to have it. So I just want to offer that further explanation, just because I know we've had a lot of different conversations around, future of McNeil.
The final of 3 items here. This one is an increase in the category of revenue. This is an increase in revenue based on our Burlington Electric McNeil Station being admitted into the renewable energy credit market of Maine. The forecast for our revenue, because we'll be able to sell RECs for all the power we produce, the new adjusted total amount is this figure, $7,364,855. And this is the final total amount that I regret now that I don't have the initial amount before me, so I could tell you the marginal increase. But
I think we had originally in the calendar year budget, I'm doing this by memory, but I think it was around 3.9 million in rec revenue, which was roughly like a half a year of, and this is full plant. This is not BED. This is us and the joint owners, and we estimate the joint owners rec revenue because we're not privy to their transactions, obviously. But so I think we had only about a half of the typical in there. This is more of the full year. So, this is reflecting kind of the current market dynamics. We also, Connecticut did just issue a draft RFP for comment. So we'll continue to engage in the Connecticut market as well in that process. But this reflects having continued access to the main market.
So just to be clear, this is an increase, right?
It's an increase over what was presented to you in December. Yes.
That's what I thought. Okay.
Yep.
yeah, and that said, those are the 3 items, as I said, approved by the joint owners December 1st, but now presented for a vote here.
Any other questions?
One other question. I mean, the turbine blade, what's the total project cost expected for that?
It's a 1.75 million.
That's the
Okay.
Total
full
cost.
price.
Okay, so it's really only 10%. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a relatively small kind of down payment.
Yeah, maybe. is so how would that affect net income as versus what we saw in December? Just, I'm trying to see what the
Well-
delta was in the rec.
They're two different things in a way, because we never presented a fiscal year budget that had any rec revenue impacts in it for BED. We did present in the
Oh.
calendar year budget for McNeil, I think a rec revenue assumption that was more like 3.9 million for the year, and now is 7.364 million. So this affects the McNeil plant economics, but we had already assumed continued access to rec markets within the BED budget, so it doesn't change it in a negative way or a positive way. There's moderate amount of difference between the Maine market and the Connecticut market, so there's a little bit of fluctuation, but they trade in a fairly close enough range that.
Are we ready for a motion?
Sure. Unless there's no
Do you have
other
a motion? Yeah.
questions. I move the Burlington Electric Commission approve the 2026 McNeil budget as amended and presented. The amended budget as presented.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Do we have any discussion on the motion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. 4 ayes. Motion passes.
Thank you. Second.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay. The next topic is something we just wanted to bring forward as we, so the next topic is talking about a policy for managing written and verbal public comments. We have not had a formal policy, and so just wanted to bring it up as an opportunity to just make sure we have a discussion and can talk about our approach. The proposed approach is actually very similar to the current operating environment that we've been acting under, but just wanted to, again, create a standard and create some clarity and transparency around what that process is. And of course, let's, if there's discussion on that, let's just have that discussion. So I can just read through some of this suggested approach and see what other comments or questions come up. So for written comments, comments should be directed to the board clerk and will be shared with all commissioners, but not included in a commission packet. The board clerk will acknowledge receipt and note that the correspondence will be shared with all of the commissioners. I'll read through the verbal public comments as well, and then we can discuss. So for verbal public comments, members of the public should attend the meeting virtually or in person and let the board clerk know through sign-up sheet or virtual meeting comment or raised hand feature that they'd like to speak. Speakers are asked to keep comments to a communicated amount of time. If a member of the public is not able to attend to share verbal comments, then they are asked to either share written comments to the board clerk, or if they prefer, attend next month's meeting if that is their preference in communication. Does anyone have any thoughts or discussion on the approach?
Well, as we talked about earlier, my only thing, at least as far as written, would be at least some, just, and I'm not sure if you address that, is just making sure that that it's acknowledged somewhere along the line, that we're not ignoring written comment to us. And then as far as verbal or here in person, I've been in a unique position with my job to have attended thousands and thousands of board meetings across most every town in Chittenden County, and so you got small towns, you got Burlington, which is a very different animal, and they tend to keep their public comments and their public comments to a very short amount of time, and no interaction with the board. And I would say at the very least, because they have so much public comment that you could go on for hours and hours. I don't think we have that problem here. Smaller towns, I've seen it just the opposite, where they've got they can let one person go on for 20 minutes, and so that finding that balance in between, I think would be, I think if we kept it to a 5 minute time, I think that would be fairly reasonable. And then the big one for me is whether or not we engage in a conversation. And I would generally advise us to not do that, because you run the risk of that getting to be becoming a tit for tat or an adversarial sort of thing, which is not what we want. We're here to take comment. We're here to act upon it as a body, but not get into. And I don't want to get into. I don't think I ever want to get into any sort of adversarial conversation with someone who's asking us questions, or have to end up bringing Darren in, and now we're kind of we're bullying, so we're be ganging up on somebody or something like that. So I don't think we ever want to get in that position. So I would advise against. Even though tonight was a little different, tonight felt like more of a presentation, even though it was. But generally, I would say also not to have a back and forth. Take people's. And I say this because I've gotten myself into this situation and I never regret it. Take people's thoughts, concerns, whatever, and then, discuss those as a board, maybe comment on them at the end of the meeting if we've had some thoughts about it, and then engage with that person, really only if we're going to act upon something. I use Alan as a prime example of him coming in with public comment, and then lo and behold, what he came in for was something that was actionable. And so then that became a discussion with Alan. And as it turned out, proved to be a valuable discussion. So I would say that we would refrain against that unless we're called to do something actionable. Then maybe have someone back and have a back and forth.
Well,
If that makes
yeah,
any
if I
sense
can,
to
if I can
anybody.
add to that, listening to your comments there. I mean, and use tonight's example, constructive is good. Constructive is when you want to actually have the back and forth, but when it becomes when it becomes destructive, that's when you need, no, you can't have those destructive conversations. But I think that's a different way of, I think, trying to capture what you're saying is that you don't want to limit these constructive conversations where there's new ideas being brought in that do need to be considered and discussed versus other ideas which may not lead to a constructive discussion.
Just to clarify, do you think this concept should be in the policy or just an ad for us to kind of consider and as we move forward, approach in that way?
My initial response to that would be policy, just so that there's consistency. This board is not going to be the same board 6 months from now, a year from now, 2 years. So for future boards, I would hope that they would want some consistent, something that they can fall back on and go, this is how we run. Just my 2 cents.
Appreciate it. Commissioner Kenny, do you have any additional thoughts?
This is a different thing, but I was just wondering, is there room for process around if a written comment is submitted, clerk acknowledges it, if there is to be, or one commissioner wants to ask, discuss, whatever, do we have a procedure for that or policy? Because I'm not exactly clear on how we want to go about that. And we can't all talk together in a setting outside of a board meeting.
I mean, my initial response would be just like bring it up to Commissioner's Corner and saying, we received this comment and I feel like there's something actionable here we should discuss, and bring it forward. I think that's a great way to make sure that we're advocating and listening and communicating public comment and need, because we already have that vehicle for us to be representing. We have over the years been like, I've heard this from a neighbor, I've heard this from from a conversation, so I think that or comment, it has come up through, as your Alan example, we've brought this back up through Commissioner's check-in or corner check-ins at the end. But I think that would be a really good vehicle for us to make sure we advocate to talk about it.
Okay.
Or add it to the agenda, right? The other piece too is if we want to make it an agenda topic, we all have that ability to send things to Elena, board
Should
clerk.
it go through you and then I assume,
Probably if it's coordinating on the commissioners, but at the same time, Elena also coordinates with me, so if you send, I mean, if we're talking policy, we should make a decision on either path, but,
I would, yeah, but through you as chair, that
Yeah.
I think would be the appropriate
Yep. Yeah, that's great,
vehicle.
right,
As well as if it will be included in the packet.
right.
So if we
Yeah,
get these written
notification.
comments, how are they gonna get distributed,
Mhm.
other than just emailing them?
Yeah, I mean, as long as in the packet, then, at the subsequent board meeting, if there's a written thing that, someone feels is actionable, then it can be elevated to that point, but at least letting, ratepayers who do communicate with us that way know that we are acknowledging them, we're not ignoring them, that, yeah, we got it, we heard you.
Yeah.
Then we decide whether or not that's something that we want to take further.
This is great. Any other thoughts or reflections? And then I can talk about next steps.
would someone that submitted a written comment get back in response the policy, or just the response to say we?
That's a good question.
Because I think it may be worthwhile to just submit this back,
The process.
the process.
Yeah, I think that's great.
So that they're not wondering what might be next, or if we're gonna talk about it. I think that
Yep.
would be helpful.
That's great. Can add that as well. That's great. Sorry, just making sure I take my own notes. Not that they won't be, I'm sure, all in the additional notes. My proposed next steps would be, I have been in touch with the city attorney ahead of this, just to make sure I understood what were potentially allowed and not allowed in the grand scheme. We've had a few communications. So this was all within the bounds of what is possible, and I'd love to add this from all of your comments and reposition it back to her and say, is this still meet, from the city attorney's perspective, does this still meet open meeting law and anything else you advise, so that we can formalize it and adopt it. Does that sound like an okay next step from the commission's perspective? Okay.
Absolutely.
General Manager Springer, do you have any other thoughts, just since you've
No, I think this is helpful because for us as staff, when we get a written comment for the commission, I think with city council, they have a consent agenda. And if you submit a written comment to city council, it automatically gets placed on the consent agenda and published. We don't have a consent agenda. So I think the policy you're outlining would be helpful to ensure that, written comments are acknowledged, distributed to commissioners. Commissioners have an avenue to discuss them or act on them if they want to, but they don't have to automatically be included in the packet, which then makes the packet lengthier than maybe otherwise would be. So I think that's a helpful thing in terms of direction for us, if that's the way you ultimately go.
Great. Okay. Thank you all for your input, and I can report back on if there's any concerns.
One more question.
Yes.
If I guess I keep going to written, but if a commissioner has a clarifying question for the person that submitted something,
Oh, interesting.
is there a process around that we should first bring it to a commissioner's corner, or is it similar to someone that came in where kind of you were saying, I forget the word you said, constructive, or
Constructive.
like
Yeah.
information
Clarification.
gathering, but I wonder if there should be some kind of process there, or are we open to judgment?
I think at least coordination with the chair and including, there's
Before sending.
before
clarifying
consenting, just in
Yeah.
case, there is something that's either depending on who it is and whenever this happens in the future,
Sure.
if they have any kind of knowledge of a previous conversation 2 years ago or whatever it is,
Right.
I think coordination would be good to do through the chair. And then absolutely there's freedom to have a conversation if we're looking for more information or
Sure.
understanding to know whether we bring it forward to a future agenda. That's great.
You want that on the agenda for next month?
That'd be great. Thank you. Okay. I'm gonna move us into the commissioners check-in, final agenda topic. Is there anything else that comes to mind or folks want to ask or clarify or share in the conversation tonight?
So, I mean, Commissioner or no.
I'm good.
I'm
Do you
good.
have a motion to adjourn?
So moved?
Second? Great. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. 4 ayes. We are adjourned.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
6:50?